understanding again how emotions work is a really big part of people starting to have more of a sense of emotion efficacy, right? Like, I know how to dance with my emotions. I know how to whisper.
You're listening to the Mindful Mama podcast, episode number 187. Today we're talking about how to become an emotion whisperer with Aprilia West. Welcome to the Mindful Mama podcast. Here it's about becoming a less irritable, more joyful parent. At Mindful Mama, we know that you cannot give what you do not have. And when you have calm and peace within, then you can give it to your children. I'm your host, Hunter Clark-Field's Mindful Mama mentor. I help smart, thoughtful parents stay calm so they can have strong, connected relationships with their children. I've been practicing mindfulness for over 20 years. I'm the creator of the Mindful Parenting membership, and I'm the author of the upcoming new book, Raising Good Humans. Welcome back. Welcome back to the podcast, dear listener. I am so glad you were here. Big news on the Raising Good Humans front. We have pre-sales are open. I know that pre-sales are open on Amazon and they may be open on other areas. So if you would like to pre-order your book, we actually have book bonuses for you. And you can find that at mindfulmamamentor.com under the tab book. It's raisinggoodhumansbook.com as well. So yay, so exciting. Oh my gosh. So Raising Good Humans is becoming so real. It's crazy. Oh my gosh. As of December 1st, I will be a published author. Crazy pants. If you are a new listener, you probably think this might be a little crazy, but I welcome you especially to the podcast. This is going to be an awesome episode. In just a moment, I'm going to be sitting down with Dr. Aprilia West, and she is a licensed clinical psychologist and an executive coach, and she is an expert in emotion efficacy. And I wanted to talk to her because mommy tantrums and daddy tantrums are one of our biggest downfalls as parents, right? So what if instead we could act from our values no matter what we are feeling? And so in this episode, I talked to Dr. West, and she is like the emotion whisperer who is going to teach us how to take care of our difficult feelings so that we can really show up fully for life. And this is a powerful, powerful episode, and some big takeaways I want you to listen for. Number one, if we try to avoid our feelings, if you try to avoid your feelings, they will control your life. People, we need to remember this. If we try to push away our feelings, they will control our lives. And number two, emotions are messengers. So they are giving us some news. There are some messengers. And then number three, learning how to relax with our emotions is really the key. So this is such an awesome, powerful episode. I am so excited for you to listen to Dr. Aprilia West. She is amazing. And before we dive in real quick, I just want to remind you that is Raising Good Humans is open for pre-order now. I'm so excited about it. And if you go to raisinggoodhumansbook.com, you can get the book bonuses, and we're going to be having a special Raising Good Humans Live event in the Mindful Mama Facebook group too. So many cool things happening. So I hope you will check that out. And now join me at the table as I talk to Dr. Aprilia West. All right, Aprilia, thank you so much for coming on the Mindful Mama podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you because you geek out on something that I geek out on, which it seems like how to deal with difficult feelings. And from my point of view, it seems like almost every single problem I see in the world, whether it's crazy, insane world leaders or, tragedies, all kinds of things can stem right back to people being unable to take care of their difficult feelings. And I wonder, I know you started as a mediator and things like that, but I'm wondering what got you so interested in this in the first place.
Yeah, well, so you mentioned mediation. I have actually had a couple of careers. It took me a little while to settle in to what I finally discovered is my ultimate passion. But I was in politics and then the music industry. And so I had an opportunity to observe people in a whole range of settings and watching how differently people would respond to difficult feelings or distress, and some, really just sort of would crumble, and others would show up so powerfully. And I became fascinated with, what makes the difference for people and how they're responding. And, ultimately how we respond to our emotions in those moments of choice really become life-defining moments. So I felt like I wanted to devote myself to something that I thought would make a difference for people.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes I think people think that we have this ability to just kind of choose how we're going to feel, right? We just believe in our willpower so much that we're just like, I will just feel this way. And can you speak a little bit to the nature of emotions and like how they arise and things like that?
Yeah. Yes. And you make such a good point. Our relationship with our emotions, our beliefs about our emotions have so much to do with how we experience them and how we respond to them. And you're right that a lot of people have this false belief that somehow we can control what arises for us in terms of our thoughts, in terms of sensations in our bodies, in terms of how we interpret what's going on or the urges. And I have never met anyone yet, although I haven't met the Buddha or, the Dalai Lama, who actually has control over what arises. What I found in my work, that what people get really good at with practice and with intention is how they respond to emotion as it arises. But the idea that we can control it somehow, I think, is really a setup, and it leads to a lot of suffering for people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, oh, what's wrong with me? I should only be able to I should be able to do this thing. So you say you observe this in other people, how others were responding to stress, how it made such a big difference in their lives. How about in yourself? Like what I so often see, at least for myself and so many others, is that we're teaching what we really needed to learn or what we're still learning, and was this something you were observing in your own life as well?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I have a history of some early childhood trauma, but in addition to that, I'm in that sort of category of people I would describe as maybe more sensitive and creative, and we tend to be internally more reactive. And so I have really big feelings about a lot of things, and the way that I've learned to navigate my life powerfully is by learning how to kind of become like an emotion whisperer to myself, and I think of that as a combination of self-compassion and some of the emotion efficacy therapy skills that I developed, but really learning how to be able to have my emotions and stay connected to what really matters, how I want to show up and what I want to create with my life, even in the small moments, has really made a difference for me.
That's so cool. I love that. The idea of becoming an emotion whisperer, and of course, self-compassion has to be involved in that. Now, when you grew up, what did you learn from your family of origin about how to deal with difficult emotions? Were you relearning, false pretenses?
I was really lucky. Both of my parents were actually in mental health and health related fields. And we, when I was growing up, it was during the time of, the 70s and the women's rights and hippie movement. So I grew up listening to Free to Be You and Me. So,
oh, you know what? I was, and during college, I worked at a store for teachers and parents, and we would play the Free to Be You and Me album, like, kind of on repeat, like here and there, we'd be able to put it in. I could totally sing you all of those songs about really wanting his is dull and
yes, yes.
cry.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Maybe we could have a sing along after the podcast or something. Yeah, I love those songs. And so, I was very much encouraged to feel all my feelings, even to a fault at times I would get annoyed with my mom for, telling me it's all right to cry. And so, in that sense, I was encouraged to have my feelings. I think, one of the things that really as a culture we didn't understand how to do, and now fortunately with the wide acceptance of mindfulness or mindful approaches to emotions, kids are learning at a much earlier age how to manage them, how to understand, what does it mean to be a human who has all of these internal reactions to things, and what do you do with them?
Yeah. Yeah. So cool. So that sort of leads us to emotional efficacy. So what is
Yeah.
emotional efficacy?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm going to give you the sort of the geeky term or explanation definition of it, and then I'll say it in more clear language. But technically, emotion efficacy is the ability to experience a wide range of emotions and still respond in a contextually adaptive, values-based manner. So what that means to you and me is that even when you're upset, you do the shit that really matters to you. So, and that can change from context to context. If, let's say, a mom is arguing with her child, and what really matters to her is holding a boundary, then the way she's going to respond to feeling irritated or upset is to, find the ability to calm herself, take a beat, and then, hold the line and say, I'm sorry that this is what you want, but we're not doing it today. In another context, it might be that she's learning to be more flexible, and that's what really matters. And in that case, she might take a breath, calm herself, and say, you know what, Johnny, you're right. Let's take 5 minutes to play a little longer on the swing set.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like, in some, in a lot of ways, it sounds so much like mindfulness meditation, like the idea that, as we practice on the mindfulness path, we are going to all these, these emotions and things arise. We're not fighting them, but we are greeting them with equanimity, and we're giving them space, but then we're choosing how to respond from that place rather than just kind of being pushed and pulled by whatever that feeling is.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, the first two, there are 5 components to the emotion efficacy protocol, and the first 2 are really that foundation you're talking about. It's first emotion awareness, where people learn to understand what does it mean to experience an emotion. So many times we don't stop to think, like, how do I know I'm feeling anger? Or how do I know I'm feeling confusion? Like, how does that show up for me in my thoughts, in my body, in my urges? And so we start by just helping people begin to understand their emotional experience better and be aware of it. And then we move into the second component, which is mindful acceptance, which you'll recognize as being just mindfulness-based practice, which is really creating space for whatever you're experiencing instead of either resisting it or avoiding it. And then what that does is it creates the space for people to pause and really choose intentionally what their next move will be and how they want to show up.
Mm-hmm. So the emotion awareness, for instance, if you have someone who comes to your office and they're wanting to work on some of these things, they're wanting to have a more well-being and a better balanced life and all those things, and you say, all right, well, let's start to feel what does your anger or whatever feel like. I imagine you have a lot of people who have a lot of resistance to even exploring that at all.
Yeah, everyone's different, of course, but for some people, emotions feel so dangerous. And what happens is, over time, if we don't like the way something feels, we come up with really clever ways to avoid, being present to that emotion. It's still happening, but we find ways to suppress it or push it away or distract ourselves. And then that reinforces the belief that this is bad and I can't let myself experience this or turn toward this pain. And so it takes courage to, to do something different with something that feels to the primal brain like a threat.
So for the listener who's saying, okay, yeah, it takes bravery, but what's the point? Like, why would I want to feel these feelings? Like if anger is arising, why would I want to feel anger? Or like if sadness grief is arising, why would I even want to feel that? Like what is the benefit of having emotional awareness and feeling those feelings?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's such a great question. I love talking about this with people because it's sort of like a light bulb goes on sometimes. But, in the olden days when we were cavemen and cavewomen, we needed those emotions to keep us alive, right? We needed to feel threatened and we needed to run away and grab our children and run off the prairie when we saw the tiger coming, or we needed to freeze if we see a black bear. But we've evolved past the point of those emotions always being an accurate indicator of what's happening for us. So stopping to feel and experience the emotion allows two things. One is to understand what's happening there. Is it something real that I need to respond to? Is there an actual fire? Or is there just an alarm bell going off that I need to either heed or silence? And two, it creates space for either you just surf your emotion wave, which we know when there's a trigger, there's a natural emotion wave that results from that will resolve on its own if we don't do the things that make it worse. But it also creates a space for, okay, this is happening. Do I need to accept what's happening, or do I need to try to change something?
Okay. All right. So we're looking at the feeling. So for the devil's advocate, like we're saying, okay, so I'm trying to feel this feeling because I want to understand what's happening. I want to create space for me to be able to surf it, right? Or to be able to have some kind of response. So what happens? What happens if we don't? What happens when we don't, want to look at those things, when we don't want to practice any kind of mindfulness?
Right. Yeah. If we just keep avoiding our anger or sadness or whatever emotions are uncomfortable, when we do that, sometimes there's short-term relief. We might feel a little bit better that, okay, I've kind of pushed that difficult thought away or this difficult feeling away. But what happens is our emotions then are controlling our life, and it keeps us from being able to move out of what I call the default mode, which is that mode where, I feel a certain thing, I act on it, or, I am sensing something or interpreting something and I'm going to respond in kind, rather than stepping back and saying, okay, what really matters and what do I want to create? What are my next words going to be as the result of what really matters and how I want to show up? And you cannot do that until you make space for that to be born. So being able to accept emotions and sit with them, and really, I like to use the word relax with them, because that's kind of the opposite of what a lot of us do when we're feeling something.
I like that too. Mm-hmm.
When we can relax with them, then something else is possible. They're no longer running the show. And we know what it looks like when our emotions run the show, because most of us do move around our lives that way. And we're going to get the same thing that we're getting.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of more of the same. So what I'm kind of hearing you say is that without any ability to look at them and to be with them, we're just reactive. We're not making choices, conscious choices. We're just reacting and reacting and reacting and reacting. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a cycle of reactivity. And typically people don't come to me and say, oh, you know what, my life is really great. I just do whatever I feel,
Yeah.
If they did, I'd be like, great, I think our work is done here. So if it works for you.
That's cool. I like what you're saying, relax with emotions. I've generally been, I've been enjoying using what Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh says, take care of difficult feelings,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like the idea that you're going to take care of them like you would take care of a small child or something like that, which I think is appropriate. But I love this idea of relax with them, because that really is what you're doing. And it also reminds me of, in some ways, like you mentioned that the surfing the emotional wave and it will resolve itself. It reminds me of like what Jill Bolte Taylor said about emotions and the sort of the science behind emotions, and that often in the brain, they're really only lasting like oftentimes like 90 seconds
Yeah.
For an emotion, for what you're like that wave, right, to go through.
That's right. That's right. And, I've heard different estimates of how long they last. But for a lot of people, just learning that one emotion trigger typically doesn't last for more than 7 minutes to really work its way all the way through. Excuse me. And that's both hopeful and terrifying, or confronting, I should say. It's hopeful because, wow, if I can learn to be a great emotion surfer, then, I just need to slow it down, and eventually I'll be able to reconnect with myself and what really matters and not act on that. The confronting part is that so many people have moved through their lives suffering, believing that, these emotions were bigger than them, that they're overwhelming, that they're threatening. And sometimes they can end up blaming themselves and thinking, well, I just must not have enough self-control if that's, how short an emotion wave lasts. So it's an important part, though, I think, of the understanding of, your own experience, to be able to say to yourself, well, if I can just let myself feel this without avoiding, distracting, ruminating, doing the other ineffective things we tend to do to sort of avoid just sitting with and relaxing with the emotion, it will resolve on its own.
Yeah. Yeah. I imagine that, for hearing that sort of like less than 7 minutes or less kind of thing, like in some ways, what I would encourage the listener to say is like, oh, if the feelings are kind of lasting a lot longer than that, then it's probably most likely, my guess is there's like ruminating happening. There's like, what's wrong with me question is making you feel worse. And then there's there's all the different thoughts that are kind of pulling you down and re-triggering the feelings that aren't feeling so good anyway.
Yeah. All because we are not comfortable just allowing our emotional experience, right?
Yeah.
So often, and this is what I say to people, that wave will resolve unless you do the things that grow it and make it go up higher and last longer. And so, and you're right that rumination is a big coping skill that people use that's not very effective that way, because you just end up going down a rabbit hole and one thing leads to the next, The other thing we do that makes emotions get bigger and last longer and eventually sometimes become what we call mood states, right, which are longer experiences of all these emotion triggers, is that we act on the emotions. And that includes things like suppressing. So if I'm telling you don't think of a pink elephant, what do you have to do to not think about it? You have to keep reminding yourself, don't think of the pink elephant, don't think of the pink elephant. So you end up thinking about the pink elephant. That takes a lot of energy. It maintains the anxiety usually. And that can go on for a long time, for days, weeks even. So understanding, again, how emotions work is a really big part of people starting to have more of a sense of emotion efficacy, right? Like, I know how to dance with my emotions. I know how to whisper my emotional brain in a way that works. I know how to downshift when I need to. So this is later in the therapy protocol, but we move into not only connecting to what matters and how do you know in the moment, but then also when you've practiced the mindful acceptance, if you still can't figure out what really matters, then we have people use some of the DBT skills like radical acceptance or coping thoughts. And then
what does DBT stand for?
Yeah, sorry, dialectical behavioral therapy, which is really well-established treatment for emotion regulation problems. Mm-hmm. And through those different skills, they're able usually to downshift their emotion, at least into a point until they can really connect with what matters again.
It's so interesting how it really all does, in my mind, as you explain this, like my brain is going like, wow, it really all does come back in so many ways to being in the present moment. If we can be in the present moment and accept what is, then this wave passes. And, if we're fighting it, it makes it worse. It's so fascinating. So yeah, so you mentioned a couple times kind of like what comes after acceptance of that. And you talked about values-based action. So tell us a little bit more about what that is.
Yeah. So values-based action is really any movement toward what matters to you. And so that can look like anything from reminding yourself of a thought or intention you have to doing some specific behavior. Let's say that you're having an argument with your partner, and in that moment, your intention is to be a better listener, right? So then you might just choose to be curious or ask more questions, and that would be in that situation a values-based action. And another example might be something like in the workplace when your boss tells you that, you just didn't get it right again, but you're feeling like he's not appreciating the work you've done. Maybe a values-based action in that situation would be to ask him for more specific feedback and to be assertive about the ways in which you try to fulfill on the task. And then it can be internal things too, which would be just, when you encounter, let's say your growth edges, when I encounter disappointing things, maybe you're struggling with depression, so you have that pull toward the negative rumination, is just to remind yourself for every sad thought that you have, because you want to move toward more balance and perspective, you remind yourself of something that's working in your life or something that you appreciate or are grateful for. Yeah, so it's really this part of the therapy, we just help people learn how to do it, but this is I find a lifelong process. I'm always still learning what matters to me in different contexts, and it changes from day to day. Even how do I want to show up in my life, with myself, with others, with my work? And so it's always it's sort of like an ongoing inquiry. What really matters? How do I want to show up?
Yeah, it's as you describe it, it almost seems to me like there'd probably be some places like you described, like that growing edge, like there'd be some places that you almost would have to decide ahead of time, right? Because I know, at least for me, when my temper takes over, like none of those nice thoughts are coming into the picture. Like I'm just like, F you to my husband, like poor guy.
Sure.
If my temper gets into the picture, and it would really take me, it would almost take like a pattern of seeing difficulties.
Yes.
Where I'm seeing, this, I might see like this thing with my daughter is happening, again and again. I'm going to make a different choice. I'm going to choose this thing according to my values. But it would almost like I would have to like fall in that hole a couple times before I even was able to like decide what my values are around that moment.
Yeah, you might have to fall in that hole to figure it out. And I'm glad you bring this up, because one of the other skills that we utilize in emotion efficacy therapy is this process of visualization. It's called technically covert rehearsal, where we do an exposure where we ask the person to intentionally, get into the scene where they know they're going to have this challenge come up and be triggered, and describe it in as much detail as possible, and then mentally rehearse, he's going to say this always triggers me, and then I'm going to feel this in my body, I'm expecting to have these thoughts that are going to be really seductive, and I'm going to want to ruminate and go down the rabbit hole, and I'm going to have the urge to, I don't know what you would do, yell at them or argue with them or leave the room. And I'm just going to practice sitting and allowing all of that to happen. And I'm going to pause. And then I'm going to imagine myself saying, honey, can you tell me more about why this is so upsetting to you? Or whatever your valued action is.
Yeah. Even though that feels so difficult and
does.
weird and horrible, in that moment, it's like against the grain, right?
Oh,
That's
it's
great.
so unnatural. I sometimes tell people it's sort of like when you're on a really long road trip and you've been drinking water and you can't find a rest stop anywhere. And then you finally get there and you start to pee and then someone says, stop. That's how unnatural and against the grain it feels to do this stuff. And yet the more we do it, the more we wire our brain that it's possible. It's almost like downloading a software, that you didn't have before, where you have new superpowers, or being in a video game where suddenly you get to the next level and now you can do things that your emotions wouldn't naturally do.
This is so exciting for me, Aprilia, because I've been using that tool, which I can't even now remember the technical name of the visualization you called it. But if any of the listeners have done the stop yelling formula, that's one of the tools there in the stop yelling formula. Like, rehearse how difficult it's going to feel and your skillful action instead. Because tell us a little bit more. You'll probably be able to explain it wonderfully how the brain works, right? Because we literally are practicing.
Yes.
We've been practicing the unskillful thing for maybe years and years.
Right.
So that's why it feels so weird.
Yeah. Well, there's a really fun little quick exercise that's taken from a super geeky part of science called relational frame theory that I can use to explain this pretty quickly.
Great.
So if I say to you, let's say book and chair, and then I say to you chair, you'll say
book.
Yes, right. And if I say book, you say
chair.
And chair is
book.
Book, exactly. So that's so quick how our minds put that together. So now imagine your husband says, I'm just going to make this up, but where is my my shampoo you were going to buy me?
Yeah.
Right? And that's probably wired with something in your brain. It's probably not book or chair. It's probably more something like, and where is my dinner that I was hoping someone else would cook me tonight, right? Or something like that. Whatever it is that that stimulus of whatever your husband's saying to you, it gets paired with either a reaction on your part, or a thought, or even a sensation in your body. And then that sensation is paired with something else, or the thought is paired with something else. And then pretty soon you have a loop that you do. And I'm guessing everyone listening has loops in their lives. I know I do. When I'm feeling a certain way, there's certain go-to things that I like to eat, or certain behaviors I use to soothe myself, or, when I'm in default mode, there are just these things that I don't even have to think about. They become, so rote.
They're not conscious. It sounds, this is like when we have the toddler and, we start to feel like I am one big button waiting to be pushed. Like, this is what you're talking about. The button that they're pushing is that you have, you've most likely been out of the parent-child relationship for 30 years or whatever. And now you're in it on the other side. And they're saying things that are sort of triggering a loop inside you that you didn't even know you had.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And they can pre-exist your role as a parent, for sure. These are things that get wired and become part of our learning history. And as a result, they become, you could almost say, vulnerabilities for us, right? Mm-hmm. Like, if anyone ever if anyone ever, refers to the scar that I have on my lip from a dog bite, or any scar thing, that's going to trigger something in me, because when I was little, I got teased about that, right? So there's a vulnerability there. And so I'm more sensitive to anything that in my brain is paired with, the appearance of my face. For other people, it could be other things that, I don't know if you've ever talked about schemas on this podcast, but schemas are super interesting. They're essentially biases or lenses through which we see the world. So one schema, for instance, that is on Jeffrey Young's schema questionnaire is abandonment. And when people have a schema of abandonment, they tend to interpret many aversive experiences in relationships as the other person abandoning them.
Oh, yeah.
And so, this is exactly what you're talking about. It takes them into a loop, right? This person doesn't call me back. They must not. Then it goes to the thought, they must not really like me. Then it might go to another thought, like, people always leave me. And it might trigger sensations in the body. And before you know it, they are going down that rabbit hole.
And this is nothing we've chosen. I
Nothing
just want to underline
it's automatic.
It's not our fault.
You
right?
do not have to work on it. No. And, one of my clients used to joke that she had such a thick abandonment schema that even when she broke up with a person, she felt abandoned. I mean, these are not rational beliefs or biases that we have. And so, I think that can also be helpful. Some of the work I've been doing since the EET protocol came out is now I've been starting to help people understand more about what kind of trigger are you experiencing, because that can be helpful. We usually experience distress for 3 reasons, as far as I can tell. Actually 4 if you include physical pain. But the other 3 would be you have a need that's unmet, a need for either understanding or support or safety or even food or shelter or water. The other reason we get triggered is that something we really care about or value gets threatened. And the third trigger is our schemas. They're things that we're interpreting as somehow being activated. And the tricky thing is that sometimes you can have a trifecta. You can have an unmet need, a threatened value, and an activated schema all in one emotion trigger. And that
you could have the 4th too. You have a child that whacks you in the elbow or elbows you in the eyeball. Boom, all 4 of those are going all at once.
Exactly. Yes. So being able to understand what's happening for you, I think can also be a powerful way of figuring out what it looks like to respond from, a place of what matters to you. Because if I'm just getting triggered, it's one of my schemas, I can soothe myself or have compassion for myself that is a vulnerability or wound I have. And that usually is enough to calm me and help me reconnect to what matters. But if I have an unmet need, I might need to do something about that, whether it's asking myself to take better care of me or communicating with the people around me and asking for what I need. Mm-hmm. And if I have a threatened value, then I have the opportunity to ask myself, is there something I need to do to stand up for what matters to me, or do I need to radically accept something, So I feel like it's a lifelong journey, getting really good at this and continuing to choose in authentic, creative ways. But there's just so much richness in learning to understand yourself and what you're experiencing and what you care about. And ultimately, I feel like it moves people into a place of feeling more authentic and connected with themselves.
Oh yeah. I mean, I imagine there are if they're anything like me, there are light bulbs going off all over the place right now for the listener. Yeah, this is fascinating. And I just want to underscore again, this is all stuff that is just happening. It's nothing we've chosen. Yeah. The distress things are nothing we've chosen. This is just happening. And so even if this is happening in the context of your adorable 2-year-old that's, triggering these schemas and these distress things, this is not your fault. So then you talk in your work about mindful coping, you talk about compassion. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So like you're saying, we cannot get rid of the experiences that arise. And I think they talk a lot about this in mindfulness too, but the way we think about it with emotion efficacy therapy is there's pain in life that we can't get rid of. And that's just a fact. And like you say, through no fault of our own, it is just painful being a human at times. But then there's this other layer of suffering that we actually do have a lot of power with. And the suffering comes largely from our inability to be with what's happening, or to radically accept the way the world is, or the way our lives are, or what it means to be having a human experience. And so that's the part we really focus on with emotion efficacy therapy, is how do you be a human with all the experiences that come with that, without reacting to it or even being enslaved by your emotions, and still every step of the way, moment by moment, connect to what matters to you and act on that instead. And sometimes that also means just having compassion for when we don't do that well, right? But you're approaching your life from a perspective of what is workable. What I can do some days is different than others, depending on how I'm resourced. And so maybe today my values-based action is just to be kind to myself as I go through the day. Whereas, other days, my values-based action might be to really stretch myself, to try and do some things that I haven't done, or do some things that require more courage, to take some risks. So it really is, it's about becoming a deeper listener of your soul or mind, or however you want to conceptualize, what it means to be a self. And then the way that those last two components fit in, again, are really learning like what matters to you in different domains of your life, and then being able to break that down into, doable actions. So, if you're a mom, just understanding like with my one child, this is really what I want to work on. This is how I want to show up, for them in our relationship. Whereas with your husband, it could be something totally different. And the coping skills are actually the last component of EET, emotion efficacy therapy. And we do those a little differently than they're done in dialectical behavioral therapy, or DBT, in that we really sort of privilege first just learning how to relax with the emotion triggers. So we have people do that first, and then they only use the coping where you're actually trying to change something if you can't connect to what matters to you. And that's because we come from that sort of third wave cognitive behavioral approach that says, we don't have to feel good to do the things that matter. And we don't want to unwittingly teach people that, before you're able to be kind or do your values-based action, you first have to feel like doing it or feel better. Yeah.
We don't have to feel good to do what matters.
Mm-hmm.
And that's different from the way people were sort of thinking before. We don't have to feel good. So we can kind of decide ahead of time that I am going to zip it when my child is frustrated and screaming at me, even though that feels really hard. It feels like trying to stop the pee.
Yes.
and that doesn't, it's not feeling good. It's not feeling normal. It's not feeling okay, but this is what I've decided to do. And that's that coping skill. And that is kind of like, so this is interesting. So for the listener, it'd be interesting to think about, what is the, maybe for you, it's being kinder to yourself when things are hard and just starting there, or maybe, especially if you happen to be a bit of a hard ass, and maybe if you're a little too soft on yourself, maybe it's trying to kind of say, I'm going to try to do this thing that's been really hard for me. And I'm going to keep trying, even though it feels really weird and awkward and horrible. And I'm going to give myself a pat on the back and celebrate if I've done it.
Right. Exactly. Yes. And we have people practice exposures of this. So, between sessions, they're going out into their lives and doing this and experiencing the discomfort and then having a chance to troubleshoot what worked or what didn't work. And yeah, it's just like going to the gym where you're building the muscle, right, to do this. But I think it is often a revelation to a lot of people that they actually don't have to feel a certain way to do the things that matter.
Yeah.
we tend to focus so much in our culture on how we feel, right? We're sort of a quick fix culture. We have a headache, we take an Advil. We, are uncomfortable with something. We're really good at making ourselves comfortable in our culture. And so I think we've lost sight of the fact that actually we're very capable of doing the things that matter to us, even with thoughts like, he doesn't respect me, or, this kid is going to end me, my patience, or having anxiety or worry thoughts. We can still do the things that matter to us and just take those along with us. It requires that we distinguish emotions from facts.
Mm-hmm. And most often we're just in it. If there's a waterfall of emotions, we're just under the water, and they are us and we are them, and we're just in it. Yeah. And so starting with that mindfulness, like you said, is like about getting a little bit of space from that, being able to see it and say, oh, okay, these are these emotions, but I can also take an action. I can also, I have enough space and capacity to be able to respond from a different place.
Yeah, to respond from a different place, and also sometimes to understand that the things that are painful to us tell us what we really care about. So usually if there's something, going on, I'm just going back to this example with your child, if something's getting triggered there, it's probably because there's something you really care about that feels either threatened or blocked in that moment. And so I think, learning again, when your emotions are schemas, you can say, okay, this is something that's getting triggered that's actually not happening. It's not a fact. But other times when you have unmet needs or values, it's an opportunity to discover, what really matters, and to say to your child, when you talk with me that way, I feel like I can't really understand what matters to you. Can you soften your voice a little bit and let's try this again? And so I just feel like it becomes such a, almost like a compass, right? For how to move through your life and really honoring your experience. I think so many times in therapy, we relate to emotions as problems. And I work really hard to help people understand that emotions are messengers, and it's up to us to figure out, what are they telling us? Are they telling us about past things that have happened, or fears or biases and schemas? Are they telling us about, something we're needing or valuing that's not, being honored? And then figuring out how to respond based on that.
This is so cool. Aprilia, I could geek out on this stuff. Okay. So I'm curious about you and yourself. Like you said, you're a highly sensitive person. This is something you've worked on. Do you have your own mindfulness practice? What do you do in your own life to keep yourself grounded and to give yourself the space and capacity to do this kind of work?
Yeah, I do. I wouldn't say I'm a big meditator, but I feel like I have developed a level of self-awareness in the way that I just move through my life. So I'm pretty much always, for better or for worse, aware of what I'm experiencing. And so when something happens, I've become really good at understanding, like, is this a schema? Is this a need or a value? And how do I want to respond to this? Including times where I'm knowingly not doing that, but I know I'm not, going through my own process of really figuring out what matters to me. And then I have compassion for the times that I just act on my emotions too. But, I think doing this work, I work with people both in clinical settings and in corporate settings as a coach. And that's really a privilege for me because I'm constantly reminded and refreshed about the process and the content and just what it means to just be present. So I feel really lucky to have that in my life. I actually am signing up for my first silent meditation retreat in a few months, and I'm excited about that too, see what that yields.
Oh, that's very exciting, Aprilia. Yeah. I'm not sure when this will when this podcast will go out for you, for us, but I just went on my first silent 7-day meditation retreat. I'd been on other retreats, but never a silent one. And if you want, you can listen to it. It'll be on episode number 171. And I talked
nice.
about it with Oren Sofer, and the release date was June 11th. So,
great. I'd love to.
Yeah, you can check it out if you want to preview. You might get a little worried from.
I was going to say, do I want to listen?
That's
Great.
cool. So I imagine, so you're saying that you practice this a lot kind of in your life in general, but I'm imagining part of that includes some specific actions. Like I bet you are practicing to not reach for your cell phone and if those uncomfortable feelings are rising, or at least all the times, right? Like I imagine there are places where you're limiting your distraction so that you can practice being present.
Yeah, I definitely do that. And I have, I have certain structure, like I try at nighttime to devote an hour before I go to bed to just reading. I also have time in the morning with my coffee where I set intentions for the day. And that's a lot about being present and just checking in with myself and what am I needing that day. And then I'm also practicing being present a lot. I'm doing some rehab and physical therapy right now on an old injury. And so that requires taking a whole lot of thoughts and feelings with me to the gym to do that. So yeah, I feel like this is very active for me.
Some physical schemas there.
All kinds of schemas, thoughts, sensations, urges, unmet needs. Yeah, I have a whole litany of of stuff going on around that.
Oh, well, this has been so fascinating. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the Mindful Mama podcast and share this. There's so much here. I think that, probably this episode deserves a re-listen because there's a lot to learn from what you've shared. So I just want to thank you for the work you're putting out into the world, your own bravery and sharing this and doing this work and et cetera. It's really been given me so much energy to have this conversation with you.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. And it's been fun talking to you about it and a real privilege for me to share what I've learned and the work that I'm doing. So thank you.
Wow. Isn't this so powerful? I mean, this whole idea about relaxing with our emotions. Oh my goodness. Yes. It is so key. And I hope that you listen to this episode again and really take some notes, because this can be life-changing stuff. So amazing. Dear listener, you rock. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end of this podcast. I am so proud of you, and I feel so connected and appreciative of you for doing that. And I am hope this podcast can help, be part of the watering those good seeds for you to really start to transform our challenges and let those challenges be our teachers to create a more compassionate and mindful world. We are part of it. We can be the change. We can do it. Remember that Raising Good Humans, my book, is available for pre-order now. So exciting. And if you order it, go ahead and then go to raisinggoodhumansbook.com and sign up for your book bonuses. Yes. Amen. All right. I hope that you take this podcast and let it sink into your consciousness in a really deep and meaningful way. And I'm wishing you a beautiful week. I'm wishing you peace. I'm wishing you joy. I hope that you see all the beautiful colors that there are to see in your life this week. And I will be looking forward to talking to you again next week, where we are going to be talking to a sleep expert. Oh my gosh, a first for the Mindful Mama podcast. So don't miss it. Make sure you're subscribed. And if you liked this episode with Aprilia West, please share it. Let me know, take a screenshot of it on Instagram and share it with me, share it with your friends. Word of mouth is the very, very best way that this podcast gets shared. And now we have almost 400,000 downloads. So this is because of you sharing it. And that I really, really appreciate. It makes a huge, huge difference to so many people's lives. So helping them get these powerful teachings into their lives. So thank you. So please do share it, leave reviews and all that good stuff to support the podcast. And then I will see you next week, my friend. Thank you so much for listening. Namaste.